your deadly brother Tyson here.
And it's your deadly sister Crystal, and you're watching Army TV.
And we're about to sit down with a few people and have a few yarns about Remembrance Day and who they remember. Let's rock and roll! Do you know what flower is commonly most worn for Remembrance Day?
The red poppy, eh?
Yeah. That'll be right. Do you have any family members who fought in World War One or World War Two?
Yeah, my grandfather, my mother's father.
Yep.
So he was a Adamant man from this way.
Yep.
Yeah, he ended up enlisting and going over to fight in a war. I believe it was Africa and somewhere in New Guinea or something.
Oh yeah. Is there any stories that you can tell, or has he told you that you can tell us? Or
No,
pass
I heard a couple of stories about him.
Yeah.
Him and the other two men that came from this way as well.
Yep.
One story was, the story was that the reason he got into the army and went to the war because he was a horsebreaker.
Yep.
He was a cowboy, and he helped break in the whalers that they used in the war. The horses they used in the war. He was a horsebreaker, and the story goes that when they asked where you're taking these horses, they told them, and they sort of looked at what they said, "Oh, can we come?" And they went. That's the story I got told.
That's the story?
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
Yep.
So what was it like for the First Nations people being part of the war?
I wouldn't know myself, not being a soldier and never fought. I could imagine it would have been traumatic, leaving the families and going away from, if they went overseas, whether they came back or not, and then understanding that they went and fought for the country, but weren't even classed as citizens at the time.
Yeah.
But went and fought for the country and then came back and weren't even recognised as citizens or soldiers, but put their life on the line. And some of them we heard still haven't come back, so that'll be traumatic for families and traumatic for their spirits too. Not to be home and to be over on some other country, buried or whatever.
Yeah.
So I actually read a song called "Too Dark for the Light Horse," which touches on our people going over to fight in the wars and coming back and not being recognised as well. So
Yeah. Thank you, Warren, for coming in for this interview. Really appreciate it.
What flower is commonly worn for Remembrance Day?
The red poppy.
Do you know a family member who was a part of the war?
My dad was in World War II, and so was my grandfather, my mum's dad. He saw active service in Darwin. My dad went to New Guinea and Darwin.
Do you have any stories about them?
Only just little bits and pieces, like they'll tell little jokes and stuff, but not really the fighting stuff. Just not. I don't know that they're repeatable, or that I know that when they come home, like my dad, he'd lost so much weight and he was so frail that his family were worried about him. So that was before he got married. My grandfather, he wasn't in the proper armed service. He was in like Dad's army thing, reserves.
Oh,
So they still took him up as, like, they picked up a lot of Aboriginal people and picked them up and took them from Alice Springs to Darwin. So he was with, I think, Anna's grandfather or uncle or something. They were all together. Yeah, Mum used to call them Dad's army, but I don't think that's right.
What was it like for the First Nations people being a part of the war?
I did hear stories about, like, one of the stories that we did hear was my grandparents, my mother's mother there were 4 girls, but there was a brother that they had called Arthur, and Arthur went to war and never came back. And then I heard stories about how they used to take the Aboriginal men over to Turkey and that, and instead of bringing them home, they'd leave them there. They'd just leave them there. They wouldn't bring them home, like, so family don't know what happened to their family. And so you hear the people when they're talking, the old people when they're talking, and they say, "Oh yeah, we used to have an uncle and his name was Arthur, but he went to war and never come home." You know, like things like that, and they couldn't tell you anything about it because you don't talk about them. And that's what they just, passed on to us, and they'd sort of say, "Oh yeah, but we used to have an uncle like this," But just in my case, when I was growing up with my dad had PTSD, but they didn't call it PTSD back then. They called it shell shocked. So he was in the Air Force, and he saw service in Darwin and New Guinea. And while he was away, he got just the stuff that happened to him. He got PTSD. So we used to have, like, I guess the things that we used to do was, like, he'd go down and he'd have a few drinks, and he'd come home and he would lay down and just swear at everything and everybody, and we'd sort of say, "Well, what did we do?" And it wasn't us. Nothing was done. It was just that he was reliving what he'd gone through in the war. And it wasn't until, like, I was an adult with grandkids that I sort of studied up on it and found out that was because he had PTSD, and so we had to live with that. One of the things we were lucky with was that we were able to, because he'd been to war, he was able to buy a house in the town. So he bought a little house in the town, and had the army gave him the paperwork to get that. Not the money, he had to pay for that himself. But that's why we didn't live on the reserve or at the mission or anywhere like that. We stayed in the town. And his mum had always lived on the west side, so we always thought we come from Port Augusta, but yeah, we were born there, but not come from there. But my granddad, my dad's dad, he come from his mother come from Beltana. We're still Flinders Rangers.
Well, that's all the questions.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
but living with that was not good. That was not good to live like that.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, and thank you on behalf of Amiwara and the episode as well.
No worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, g'day. How are you?
Yeah, good. You going alright?
Yeah, pretty good.
Oh,
pretty good.
That sounds deadly. Alright, so do you know what flower is most commonly worn on Remembrance Day?
Well, I believe it's a poppy.
You believe it's one of those red ones, eh?
Yeah, red ones. Because they're pretty flowers. They've got the nice petals on them.
Yep.
Yeah, nice red petals.
Yep. Yeah. Do you know anyone who fought in the war? Yeah. I had two of my uncles went to war from up Nebrabana way. Yep.
One my dad's oldest brother and mum's oldest brother.
Yep.
They both went, and there's another old Aboriginal guy too. Went from around that area, Copley, Linders area.
Is there any stories?
I got my own views about wars anyway. I mean, in terms of my two uncles, one of them came back, the other one didn't. My dad's brother, he died in the territory there. This is when the war that they were in is when the Japanese tried to take over Australia or come into Darwin. My uncle died of not in battle, but by malaria.
Yeah.
The other one came home, and I was able to tell stories about their camp and whatever, about the war itself.
Yeah, about their experience.
This way he's wanted to share the story about. They had two camps, the main camp, but all the Aboriginal soldiers returned soldiers had to go. They had their own camp, so they was camped in one area, and the main camp was where non-Aboriginal people were. A separate camp. but their digger mates would come, like my uncles, like the Aboriginal fellas, digger mates just come over and eat with them, because they get fresh meat and that. The other lot were eating, canned bully beef and all this army rations.
Yeah.
Whereas the other lot we had fresh. The Aboriginal guys were collecting and gathering bush tucker and hunting,
Cooking up the
the antlers and whatever. Do everything.
Yeah.
Live, at a very healthy diet, whereas other lot were living off of army rations. There's a few other things that sort of wasn't so pleasant, I guess, when they came back, when Aboriginal soldiers came back. They weren't treated the same way as their digger mates, where some of them were given, non-Aboriginal people were given lands, but the Aboriginal diggers didn't get anything. They weren't even allowed to go into the pub with their digger mates, and share a beer. They, they were treated. They weren't treated like returned soldiers, like the other guys were.
Yeah.
So it's sad, and it's something that we all need to remember. What our, and I guess that's what Remembrance Day is all about, is taking time to remember the fallen soldiers, all the people that defended our country. Sometimes I think to myself, though, that it's not always, the wars aren't, really should be our concerns, because a lot of times it's not about us. It's someone else making decisions and sending people off to war. It's some other country fighting. There's some sort of agreement, but when no one really came out to support us when our people were massacred, here on this continent, it's sad that our people should go and join forces to fight someone else's wars.
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion. Thank you anyway.
Thanks, Uncle Vince.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
We will see you next time on Ummy TV, and remember, stay black and deadly!